Hello everyone, I'm Laurie Stevahn from Seattle University. I'm here with Dr. Mort Deutsch at the Mort Deutsch International Center for Cooperation and Conflict Resolution in Teachers College at Columbia University in New York City. Mort, I'm so grateful to be here with you today.
And I'm delighted that you're here.
On behalf of the International Association for the Study of Cooperation in Education, its co-presidents Linda Balash and Maureen Breeze, its executive board, and its membership worldwide, it is a great privilege and honor to present to
Thank you.
the organization's Lifetime Achievement Award, jointly with David and Roger Johnson at the University of Minnesota.
Great guys.
This year, 2015. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So there's going to be an award ceremony at the organization's international conference in Denmark in October. And I'd like to take some time and have a conversation with you so that those attending the conference
Sure.
can come to know you and get to know your work and your profound, pivotal, foundational impact that you've had in the world of group dynamics, social interdependence, cooperative learning, conflict resolution, social justice. Can we do that?
Sure, why
Wonderful.
not?
Well, I'd like to just start by asking you, how did it all begin? How did you get involved with, this pathway that's become your life's work around cooperation?
Well, it's a sort of strange indirect route. I came out of World War II. I had been in the 8th Air Force. And when I came out of World War II and the atomic bombs had just been dropped, and the UN Security Council had just been formed and the 5 permanent members were selected, I resumed graduate study at the MIT Kurt Lewin Research Center for Group Dynamics. That was in 1945, September 1945. And I was resolved, as a result of my experience in World War II and the nuclear bombs, that I would want to contribute something for a peaceful world, make the world more peaceful. So I thought of the UN Security Council and the 5 permanent members, and I wondered whether they would cooperate or compete. And as I thought about that and what would be the consequences of their making one choice or another, I started thinking of my dissertation research. And at Kurt Lewin's center, the atmosphere was, there's nothing so practical as a good theory. So I turned that interest in peace and cooperation competition at the UN into a theoretical and research dissertation on the effects of cooperation and competition. In the process of doing my research, I used the students I was teaching in an introductory psychology course. I formed them into 10 groups of 5 people each. 5 groups were going to be graded competitively. The one who contributed most to the group would get an A, second most B, C, D, and D. I didn't fail anybody.
Brutal.
And the 5 cooperative groups, members would get the same grade, depending on how well actually they did in comparison theoretically with other groups.
So strong interdependence that you had built in for them.
And that was the fundamental study, and behind it was a whole theory. And the research supported the theory. Now, it led to cooperative education because I found that the cooperative groups learned a lot more than the competitive groups.
So the learning tied it in
Yeah.
with teaching and education.
Right. And I wrote an article on that, and it was published, I think, in an education journal. Obscure article somewhere that I can't probably even locate now. But when I took my degree and finally ended up here at Teachers College, and David Johnson was one of my first students, he became very interested in this work. And he did a lot of thinking about it. And he's the one, with his brother and others, to have really helped develop the field of cooperative education. I think I gave him the stimulus for it, and I think I gave him the theoretical model that underlies cooperative learning.
And of course, I am
And you
David's
are-
doctoral.
You're
Yes.
your intellectual grandchild.
So we're all in the lineage from Mort Deutsch.
Yes, and we've all felt that it's better to cooperate than to get into a win-lose struggle, you know? And
I think that, so many educators, because I come out of a strong teacher teaching and learning orientation, I think, when so many educators think about cooperative learning, they do think of people like David and Roger Johnson and many others who've done much work in the area, like Robert Slavin, Elizabeth Cohen, Noreen Webb, Yael Sharon, Shlomo Sharon, and so on and so forth. But I don't think a lot of people know that your work really preceded it all with this theorizing, the theory of cooperation and competition, which, as you've just explained now, is part of this original doctoral pursuit.
yes, I think it provides the intellectual base for cooperative education, and I think David and Roger and others at the University of Minnesota with him have done so much to show how important and how effective it is as a way of improving education and improving intergroup relations and helping people learn to work together and get along.
And of course, it's not just teaching in classrooms, it's the whole school,
Yes,
the cooperative school and
absolutely.
systems that has become so powerful in terms of leadership education for principals, superintendents, and beyond. I mean, this pertains to business, government, anytime people are coming together to get good work done, cooperative interaction is a
Absolutely.
good idea.
You know,
I might also say, Mort, that you and the Johnsons over the years have maintained this high value of always linking theory, research, and practice. It hasn't just been the theorizing or the let's go out and try something. You've always been committed to linking those through. So that goes back to what you're saying about a strong theoretical base that makes a difference.
well, I think, although I had that orientation probably before Kurt Lewis certainly was my mentor in that and had a strong orientation for theory, but theory that led to practical implications, to dealing with social issues. And that's what my work has always been about. Development of theory, but theory that could be used in dealing with important social issues. After conflict, after cooperation competition, I went on to study conflict resolution, which is also an important element of cooperative education.
So I was going to ask you, that was where I was going next. You know, you always link conflict with cooperation.
Yes.
So could you explain why that strong connection and how the conflict, just the basis for that link?
Sure.
Because you always bring that in.
Well, in my experimental research on cooperation and competition, I found that cooperative groups were much better at resolving whatever conflicts arose in their groups than the competitive groups. They were more constructive in their orientation.
And that was without any kind of conflict training, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was interested in what led to cooperation, what led to conflict resolution, competition. And so I decided to study situations that had a mixture, you know, like negotiating and bargaining situation, conflict situations, that inevitably had a mixture of cooperative and competitive elements. And I was interested in seeing what determined whether it would move in a cooperative or competitive direction. What were the factors influencing that? And my students and I did a whole series of research and published this book on the resolution of conflict.
Well, which is still foundational today. In 1973 it was published.
Yeah.
And it still is
1973.
1973.
Yeah.
And it still is hugely foundational in the whole area of conflict
Well,
resolution.
We did lots of different studies with lots of different variables. And ultimately we came up with a rather simple theoretical solution, basically. What I call Deutsch's crude law of social relations. That is, the typical effects of cooperation tend to induce cooperation, and the typical effects of competition tend to induce competition. Like a typical effect of cooperation is honest, open communication. Honest, open communication.
Being willing to share.
Yeah. Trusting, friendly attitudes, willing to help the other, willing to empower the other, to share power. All of those factors contribute to the development of a constructive resolution of conflict. On the other hand, if the competitive effects, where you try to mislead the other, so communication tends to break down, you don't trust the other, you tend to try to oppose and block the other is proposing. And you don't want to enhance the power of the other, you want to minimize the power of the other. Those sorts of effects tend to lead to a destructive resolution of conflict when you introduce that into a mixed motive situation. So that was an important element to involve in cooperative education too, because it's important to learn how to manage the inevitable conflicts that are going to arise in cooperative situations, as well as in other situations, to handle them in a constructive manner. And we found that, of course, some of the issues around which conflict was centered were issues of distributive justice. And so
Which brought you into the social justice area. Well, I know that much of your work has been leveraged towards social justice. Particularly, you've written much about awakening a sense of injustice.
Right. And overcoming oppression.
Mm-hmm. So disrupting oppression. You wrote an article that made a big impact on me. I believe it was in 2006 about interrupting oppression.
Yeah.
And there you spoke to issues of awakening a sense of injustice, moral community, inclusion, exclusion, which I know Susan Opatow has gone on and done much much
Brilliant work in that area.
work with. So sometimes, those who focus on areas of social justice, my impression is it's approached in a more, pointed way. But what you're saying is that it has fundamental links and ties and roots with
Right,
cooperation
right. And how you resolve conflict. And it also relates to my work on prejudice. Actually, the first study I did after I got my PhD was a study of integrated and segregated interracial public housing.
Is this in the late 40s, early 50s?
Yes, it was published in 1951, Interracial Housing, at the University of Minnesota Press. But the point is, in this study, and then, since I'm actually writing something about it now, and I told you I started off with an interest in issues of war and peace. And during my career, I have written a lot, spoken a lot, been a social activist a lot in the issues related to peace. I strongly opposed the Vietnam War. I was very active in trying to undo the nuclear insanities of the Cold War and other aspects of the Cold War, and was involved with government officials, State Department, military, and various conferences. So like Lauren, I've been trying to get my ideas into the real world. But central to all of those ideas is the basic notion of cooperation, and right now, in the last several years, I've been working on the issues of global community. I feel that with issues like climate change, the depletion of water resources, weapons of mass destruction, economic problems, and the gross inequalities that exist. These are problems of our global community. If we were a small, well-integrated community that worked cooperatively, effectively, we would be working together on those problems. And I've been interested in trying to stimulate the development of a global community, and I and a couple of my colleagues have written a paper on developing a global community, a social psychological perspective. And we have also done some research. We outlined, we have a proposal, imagine a global human community, which had the basic values of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights and FDR's 4 freedoms. And in a survey, we asked whether you would like to be a member of such a community. And if you would you be willing to commit yourself to take public constructive actions to facilitate the development of such a community?
And what have you found?
And we had, the survey was done by SurveyMonkey, I don't know if you know that group. Over 600 people surveyed, adults. And we found that interesting results. 70% of the people said yes, they would be willing to take constructive, positive action.
Public.
Yeah. And if we compared Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, young versus old, educated versus less educated, and so on, you got the expected results. That is, more Democrats, more liberal, more educated, younger people were more in favor of it. But more than 50% of those who said they were conservative or Republican or older or less educated were in favor. So that, but one big caveat.
What's that?
When we looked at the kind of actions that they said they would take, we found the actions were of a very personal, limited nature. That I'd be a better parent. I'd go to church more often. I would help my neighbor. It wasn't the sort of action that would necessarily lead to the development of a global community. And we have come to the conclusion that goodwill people often don't know how to act at a political level, at a social level, to achieve what they want to achieve. You know, I think that's true.
Which brings it back to education,
Yeah.
in a sense, the teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, in cooperative learning, we know the importance of explicitly teaching social interaction skills.
Right.
So what you're saying is put towards social justice and
But
taking
it's
action. There may be
it's not only
dimensions
social
of that.
interaction skills. That's important because you want to join with others.
Mhm.
But to think of how you can influence things politically, how you can influence your local.
Well, do you think the work that, you know, me being from Seattle, we have the Gates Foundation. Do you think the kind of work that the Gates Foundation and Clinton's Foundation and other, I know they're attempting to bring minds from around the world to solve some of our world's most serious
I think they are doing
issues.
very good work.
Is that somewhat what you have in mind or could be used as an example? You're going beyond that even.
Yes, I think you need to get a lot of different disciplines in addition to social psychology
Multidisciplinary.
involved. I mean, you have governance issues, you have economic issues, you have weapons issues, a variety of issues. As a social psychologist, as social psychologists, we identified a number of particular problems. How do you develop that sense of positive interdependence globally so that people in Seattle as well as Beijing and New York and Rio de Janeiro and wherever all feel that they're linked together and recognize that your fate depends upon their fate, and their fate depends on your fate. Secondly, how do you develop a time perspective that goes beyond the next 3 months or next year, goes to include the next 3 generations at least? How do you also develop the kind of open-mindedness that peace education and cooperative education stimulates, so that people who feel quite strong ideological differences are able to have a constructive dialogue and find out where they agree as well as where they disagree.
Well, especially in light of, you know, perceived scarcity or times when
Sure.
conflicts, I know the research says that then, you know, those are times when the competitive
Yes.
conflicts do not always play out constructively in those situations. I mean, we see that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We see, I mean, the present state of the world is that the internal conflict among nations is leading to harm to our ecological, biophysical environment, which is necessary to sustain human well-being.
Globally,
Yeah, globally.
affects everyone.
Right.
So what role do you see social media playing when you speak to this more global interdependence? Do you think about that? Could you speak to that or share your thoughts with us around that?
You take a look at what happens typically now as we approach presidential elections in 2016. What you have is, instead of really constructive dialogue about the issue, you have people attacking one another, not trying to see where they can cooperate to deal with the important problems that we all face. Even the multi-billionaires are going to be affected by climate change. I mean, you know.
Well, so in a way that goes back, I spoke earlier of awakening a sense of injustice. I mean, it goes back to that deep sense of people's perceptions of how their own fate is linked to others. That's part of it.
Yes, it is. It is. So, and that sense of mutual, I mean, that's what cooperative means. It means you have that sense of mutual positive interdependence, and you want to work to facilitate its productive use.
I know that the center here, you've linked with organizations and individuals worldwide. I know you've worked with the United Nations, yes?
Yes.
Is there any standout project that has been conducted or that you're currently involved in?
Well, I'm not really currently active except in writing and sort of advising. But yes, at the UN we did a lot of training of staff. We even had a course for people at the UN that I participated in. And one of the students, but he was a mature student before I served as his doctoral dissertation advisor, is the ombudsman for the UN.
Currently?
Yes. And Peter has been doing work on developing mediation programs at the UN, and a lot more that I am not fully up to date with.
I mean, I think those are really courageous steps because it goes back to recognizing a deeply complex problem, but not being satisfied with just dealing with it in an intellectual, theoretical, getting out there and trying to leverage people coming together to truly learn and solve, which again brings it back to teachers' roles in education.
Peter is really an outstanding guy for this because, he was an actor before he became involved as a graduate student here. I'm basically a somewhat shy, introverted person, and so I'm not as good at public presentation and getting, people involved. I work better with small groups and, students and stuff like that. I've had, I think, powerful indirect effects. Like the thing I'm most proud of, I don't know if you know of this, two former people from Poland, both psychologists, have spent a fair amount of time here with me. One was a leading member of the Communist Party, Janusz Rakowski, and one was a leading member of the Solidarity movement, Janusz. They both, in a sense, learned our approach to negotiation and conflict resolution. And they were leading negotiators, Rakowski for the Communist Party and Gerlach for the Solidarity movement, during the transfer, the peaceful transfer of power from the communist government to the Solidarity movement. and both have written thank you letters to me for the help I gave them in terms of their way of approaching conflict.
I know many of your stories, but I thank you for sharing that. I did not know that. So are the letters framed and in your office? You're much too humble for that.
I've attached it to a chapter I wrote in this book on theories in social psychology that a number of people edited.
So we can
Yes.
read the letters.
Yeah.
I'm going to go find that writing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. There's so many educators that are attending this conference, and many are newer to cooperative learning and don't know the history. So I'm wondering what words of wisdom would you give to people newer, and then taking it for those of us who've been at this for a while, what would you encourage us to focus on?
I think the basic first fact is to help everyone realize how positively interdependent they are. Yeah. Kids in classrooms should learn that they all are part of a common humanity, common group, where their fate is dependent upon the fate of the others in the classroom. And therefore they should help one another. And there are many different ways that can be done. But that's the basic element. I think David and Roger have written for our next research project what can be done to foster cooperative education. And it's a wonderful, brief statement that they should tell you about.
Well, there is that fundamental underlying set of values.
Yes, but they tell you
are foundational to this.
how you can help transform the system. How you as an adult can work with other people to stimulate the growth. And Roger and David particularly have done so much constructive controversy as a form of dealing with ideological differences, a way of developing open-mindedness.
I know they are, David being one of your PhD students. How many doctoral students? You've had many that have gone on in many, many areas to influence the world, again, all stemming from this cooperative social
I think there's about
independence.
70 doctoral students. I had some at NYU as well as...
Prior to coming to Teachers College.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how many people know that you were at Bell Laboratories.
Yes, there were several people. And then, I've been at conferences in almost so many different parts of the world trying to spread the good word.
And you're still at it.
Well, I don't, it's more difficult to travel for me now because the last time I traveled was to a grandson's wedding. And it was only to Maryland. It was not a big deal. But we got the wrong information about where we should go to check in, and then we had to go someplace else. And then when we came back, there was nobody to help us get to in a wheelchair or cab and so on.
Travel's exhausting when it goes well, let alone when there are
Yeah.
complications.
Yeah, no. With my, you see, in 2000, I think it was 2007, I had a severe spinal stenosis and I had surgery, but I got a MRSA infection and that led to complications. And so, while I'm in generally pretty good health, my ability to move without, a walker is limited.
Well, this is why we're all coming to you.
Well,
A big birthday
you're
celebration tomorrow with all of your former students
You're always
returning.
welcome. You're always welcome.
You're always so gracious. Well, is there anything else that you would like people to know about cooperation, conflict resolution, social justice, your life's work?
I think sometimes it's very difficult to overcome the prejudices that hinder the development of cooperation. And that's why one has to start focusing on, well, I would like to get an Orthodox Jew and a very conservative Muslim debate about something. To help them see how we can get them to see common grounds as well as differences. To see that they should work together on many issues, even as they hold themselves separate on some. I'd like to see that as, I'd like to approach the more difficult issues that face the world now. The people who have extremely different opinions that are leading to this stupid violence.
Ever since I've known you, Mort, your heart is always in doing good in the world. So, thank you.
Well,
I'm grateful.
I saw a lot of evil when I was growing up. I grew up with the Depression and then World War II.
And that greatly, obviously, has influenced your thinking in the direction that you've taken.
And as, frankly, as a Jew, in the 20s and 30s, there was a lot of discrimination against, that I ran against, prejudice. But,
So those personal experiences as
Yeah,
well
so
informed your path.
so I immediately felt I had to identify with the underdogs.
Well, and then you brought your great genius into it. And for those of us who've had opportunities to know you and work with you, we feel so fortunate.
Well,
So
I've been lucky to have wonderful students. Without them, I wouldn't have been so brilliant.
well, as you know, I've taken this into our educational leadership doctoral program at Seattle University, and it's hard work, as you say. I think often people look to just the cooperative learning, teaching, and achievement component of it, and yet it's so much more.
Yeah.
And I teach a course on empowering leaders for social justice, and I start with positive interdependence. In all situations, how do you begin to bring people together who have differences and try to find that common core? And then, of course, it is in the interactions, as you're theorizing predicts, that where the trust can grow and the openness and the relationships develop.
Yeah, I think the areas that I've worked in, cooperation, competition, conflict resolution, social justice, peace, and prejudice are really fundamental to society. And I think I made some useful contributions, but there's so much more that needs to be done. So I'm delighted that there are people like you and David and others who are doing really outstanding work.
You inspire us.
Good.
So thank you, Mort, for taking this time to talk with me
It's
It's
always
just
a joy.
such an honor. Again, just hearty congratulations
Thank you.
for this Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Association for the Study of Cooperation in Education. And your work has just been so foundational, so pivotal and influential for all that has come from your original theorizing.
Well, thank you.
I just want to personally thank you for being such a mentor. And you have mentored so many of us throughout the years. I'm kind of like the third generation. You've had many first. Well, you're the original generation,
No,
and then you've mentored so many of your
Kurt
doctoral
Lewin.
students.
Lewin was the original.
And then, well, you've just, your graciousness, and you have always made those of us in your presence feel like we're doing something worthy. And I know you're a great genius. So I just so appreciate your humility and your humbleness. You've just mentored so many of us. So, you've brought patience and encouragement. You've supported us. You've brought such kindness. And you've done it all with such warmth and grace. So thank you again. Congratulations. Happy 95th birthday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.